days last year when going back to Cambridge School of Art did not feel possible. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way, just in a very ordinary, tired way. There were days where I told myself I needed to slow down and stop asking so much of myself, and maybe I wasn't meant to be there anyway. I'd intermitted from my masters for the maximum time allowed, 1 whole year. I told myself that might be enough to get through treatment, enough to gather strength, and enough to return. And at the time, returning felt hopeful. But later, it felt unlikely. When you're not well, you quietly limit your dreams, not because you stop caring, but because it hurts less if they don't happen. A funny thing happened when I returned, something unexpected, and it was coming across places that held an emotional charge. The concrete step where I sat as the surgeon called to explain that the latest scan had revealed not just 2 cancerous lumps but a mass of precancerous cells, the moment my lumpectomy plan quietly shifted into a mastectomy. Or the library where I took the pre-operation phone call and was gently and rightly asked to leave for talking in between the bookshelves. Or the early mornings in the classroom where I would arrive before everybody else, worrying about what was to come and actually when I might have to leave the course. But now, walking through them again, carrying ideas and possibilities instead of fear, is like opening a window and letting the spring breeze through. My original cohort are now exhibiting in London and Cambridge and preparing for the Bologna Children's Book Fair. It's part pilgrimage, part portfolio Olympics, part espresso-fueled speed dating for illustrators and publishers. It's an extraordinary gathering where publishers, agents and illustrators meet, international rights are negotiated, portfolios are opened, new talent is discovered, and masterclasses are delivered, and children's books begin their journeys across languages. I'm cheering from the sidelines, watching them all take their courageous next steps. I know I won't have the energy for a visit to Bologna this year, but I'm well underway with plans for next. And I've stepped into something new myself, a new cohort, new faces, new friends, and a new 3rd module called Illustration and the Audience, the Paradox. The premise is simple and destabilising at the same time. It's you make narrative work before deciding who it's for. And my observational sketchbooks that I created this last year gave me confidence. I knew I could find characters, I could find story seeds, but thumbnails and storyboarding, they were tricky and they required decisions. For a few weeks I lingered in poetic atmosphere, a kind of creative procrastination. But eventually I made the leap. A granny who has lost a smile and a granddaughter who's determined to find it. The story is clearer, but it's not what I was expecting to make, but it's been so valuable to introduce myself to sequencing, rhythm, beats, story arc, and narrative image making. All of our tutors are practicing authors and illustrators, and they all offer, as you can imagine, different perspectives. And it can be confusing holding so many opinions, and sometimes I fear ideas risk death by committee. But I'm learning that the trick isn't to follow everything. The trick is to notice which advice facilitates the biggest leap. And for me, that meant draw large with charcoal, interrupt with monoprint. Monoprint experiments, both plate and offset, have facilitated a really brilliant way of interrupting any overworking and a penny dropping moment of starting to understand visual hierarchy decisions. The offset machine, once intimidating, it is huge. It's slightly oily, but it now feels like a mechanically minded friend who requires planning and patience but rewards you with surprises. There's something steady about building a process again, sketching and planning at home, printing with the offset machine in the print room, hand embellishing with such a limited touch, sharing work with peers and tutors for feedback, and listening, but probably most importantly, choosing. Going back to making picture books now feels inevitable, and I'm not entirely sure how I once believed I wouldn't return, but I understand why I shrank the dream when I did. I needed to protect myself. I needed a benchmark, 1 year, so I didn't have to solve everything at once. But I'm chuffed to be back on this track, not because it was certain, but because sometimes what returns isn't the original dream, it's the hard-earned clarity that only comes after you've been somewhere you didn't choose. And if you're in the season where things feel paused, reduced or uncertain, where your dreams have quietly shrunk to something more manageable, that doesn't mean they've disappeared. It might just mean you're protecting yourself. Outlooks shift, energy returns in strange increments, rhythm changes before strength does, and you don't have to decide everything today. Just keep the pilot light on.